I'm Amber, 32 years old, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. That label followed me right into the upscale restaurant where we gathered for what should have been a joyous celebration dinner. I was running 15 minutes late because of a work emergency, something my family would never understand. I'd been financially supporting my brother Ryan since his latest job loss, but the text messages demanding to know where I was stung anyway. Little did I know this evening would finally force me to redefine what family really means. While I share this story about family loyalty, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that might just change how you see family dynamics. Growing up, Ryan was always the golden child despite his irresponsibility. 4 years older than me at 38, he somehow managed to charm his way through life while I picked up the pieces behind him. Our parents raised us in a middle-class neighborhood in Michigan, where Dad worked as an engineer and Mom taught elementary school. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they provided us with everything we needed and taught us the value of hard work. At least, that was the lesson I took to heart. Amber always has her nose in a book, my mother would say with a mixture of pride and concern. Ryan, on the other hand, knows how to enjoy life. What they called enjoying life was what I recognized, even as a teenager, as irresponsibility. Ryan would stay out past curfew, skip classes, and charm his way out of consequences. I watched this pattern repeat throughout high school and college, where I worked part-time jobs to help pay my tuition while Ryan switched majors 3 times before finally graduating with a liberal arts degree that he never used. When our parents died within 6 months of each other, Dad from a sudden heart attack and Mom from cancer shortly after, they left us a modest inheritance. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to give each of us a solid financial foundation. I invested mine carefully and used some to finish my MBA. Ryan burned through his portion in 18 months, spending it on a failed restaurant venture and an impulsive trip around Europe. It's what Mom and Dad would have wanted, he insisted when I questioned his choices. They always said life was for living. After the inheritance was gone, the pattern continued. Ryan bounced from job to job, always with a new passion project that somehow required my financial backing. There was the food truck idea, the podcast network, the artisanal coffee shop, and most recently, a cryptocurrency investment scheme that left him not only broke, but in debt to some concerning people. Each venture ended the same way, with Ryan showing up at my door, suitcase in hand, with promises that this time would be different. 8 months ago, after being evicted from his apartment, he moved into my spare bedroom just until things turn around. He was still there, eating my food, using my utilities, and contributing nothing but empty promises to find work. Despite all this, our extended family continued to view Ryan as the charming, fun family member and me as the uptight workaholic. Aunt Deborah, our mother's sister, frequently reminded me how Ryan had your mother's spirit, while I was so serious, just like your father. Uncle Frank, Aunt Deborah's husband, was a retired postal worker who spent most family gatherings talking about his golf game and complaining about his pension. Their children, my cousins Jessica and Timothy, were in their 30s like us, but seemed to share Ryan's approach to responsibility rather than mine. Last Thanksgiving at Aunt Deborah's house, I overheard a conversation that still burned in my memory. "How's Amber handling everything?" Aunt Deborah asked Ryan in the kitchen. "Oh, you know Amber," Ryan replied with a laugh. "All work and no play. But hey, someone's got to pay the bills, right?" They both chuckled, unaware I was around the corner. I had just come from working a 4-hour shift remotely to handle a client emergency before driving 2 hours to make it to dinner. That night, I also discovered Ryan had told everyone he was between opportunities, rather than admitting he'd been fired for repeatedly showing up late. I loved my family, I truly did. But years of being the fixer, while receiving none of the appreciation, was creating a resentment I could feel hardening inside me. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, had been gently suggesting for months that I needed to establish boundaries, but every time I tried, the guilt would overwhelm me. "They're family," I would say, as if that explained everything. "Family doesn't mean accepting mistreatment," Dr. Martinez would counter. "Healthy relationships require mutual respect." I knew she was right, but breaking lifelong patterns isn't easy. Growing up as the responsible one means you become the person others rely on and sometimes exploit. My identity had become so entangled with being the family problem solver that I wasn't sure who I'd be without that role. My professional life couldn't have been more different from my family dynamics. As a marketing executive for a growing tech company, I was respected, valued, and recently promoted to director of brand strategy. My colleagues saw me as confident and assertive. If only they could see how quickly I reverted to the accommodating little sister around my family. The dinner reservation that evening was Ryan's idea. He insisted we needed quality family time and that the newly opened Sterling Steakhouse was the perfect place to reconnect. I should have recognized the red flags immediately. Ryan suggesting an expensive restaurant was usually the prelude to asking for money. But I wanted to believe in the possibility of a genuine family connection, so I agreed. What I didn't know until I arrived was that Ryan had invited the entire extended family, Aunt Deborah, Uncle Frank, Jessica, and Timothy. 5 people at a restaurant where entrees started at $40 apiece. And as I would soon discover, there was a 6th person who would factor into this evening in a way that would change everything. The Sterling Steakhouse gleamed with understated luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over leather booths and white tablecloths. A pianist played soft jazz in the corner, and waitstaff in crisp black uniforms moved efficiently between tables. This wasn't just expensive, it was special occasion expensive. I smoothed down my navy blue blazer as the maitre d' led me through the restaurant. I'd come straight from work, and while my outfit was business appropriate, I felt underdressed compared to the other diners in cocktail attire. Spotting my family wasn't difficult. Ryan's boisterous laugh carried across the restaurant. They were seated at one of the prime tables near the windows, with a view of the city skyline. As I approached, I noticed 2 things immediately: the champagne bottles already chilling in ice buckets, and the fact that they'd left me the seat with my back to the view. Finally, Ryan exclaimed, standing to give me an exaggerated hug. "We thought you might have forgotten about your own family." "Work emergency," I explained, settling into my chair. "Sorry I'm late." "Always working," Aunt Deborah sighed, shaking her head. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a strand of pearls I recognized as my mother's. "Your mother always worried you'd miss out on life that way." I bit back a retort about how my work ethic had kept a roof over Ryan's head, instead forcing a smile. "Nice to see you too, Aunt Deborah." Uncle Frank nodded without looking up from the menu. "Prices here are something else. Good thing we have Ms. Corporate Success with us tonight." He chuckled at his own joke. My cousins Jessica and Timothy offered quick greetings before returning to a conversation about a mutual friend's destination wedding. Jessica, a part-time yoga instructor, and Timothy, who was between jobs like Ryan, had always been closer to my brother than to me. "I took the liberty of ordering champagne," Ryan said, gesturing to a waiter who was already pouring a glass for me. "We're celebrating." "What are we celebrating?" I asked, suddenly wary. "Family," Ryan declared, raising his glass. "And your promotion, of course." I hadn't told Ryan about my promotion yet. It had just been announced that morning. But of course, he'd seen it on LinkedIn or heard through our mutual connections. The timing of this dinner was making more sense. As I glanced around the table, I noticed something odd, an additional place setting at a small table in the corner of the restaurant. It was partially obscured by a decorative pillar, almost hidden away. Before I could ask about it, the waiter appeared to take our orders. "I'll have the Wagyu ribeye," Ryan said without hesitation. "And can we get another round of the beluga caviar appetizers?" Aunt Deborah ordered the lobster tail. Uncle Frank the porterhouse, and my cousins both chose the surf and turf special. I opted for the grilled salmon, partly because I wasn't particularly hungry and partly because it was one of the less expensive main courses. "Just the salmon?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Come on, sis, live a little. It's a celebration." "The salmon is fine," I insisted, handing my menu to the waiter. As the waiter walked away, Ryan leaned forward with the animated expression he always wore when he was about to pitch something. "So, I've been working on something exciting." "Here it comes," I thought. "I've been researching NFTs and digital art marketplaces," he continued, eyes bright with enthusiasm. There's an incredible opportunity right now for someone with marketing expertise to partner with artists and create a curated platform that... Ryan, I interrupted gently. Can we just enjoy dinner first before discussing business ideas? His face fell slightly before he recovered. Of course. But I'd love your thoughts later. I've already connected with some amazing artists who are ready to sign on. Aunt Deborah reached over to pat my hand. You should listen to your brother, Amber. He's always had such creative vision. Remember how your mother always said he had an entrepreneurial spirit? I remember, I said, taking a large sip of champagne. What I actually remembered was bailing Ryan out of his last 3 entrepreneurial visions. The waiter, a professional-looking man in his 40s named Michael according to his name tag, seemed to notice the tension at our table. As he brought bread to the table, he gave me a subtle, sympathetic look. So, Amber, Jessica chimed in, are you still working all the time, or have you managed to find a social life? Before I could answer, Timothy added, Yeah, when was the last time you went on a date? It's been, 2 years since that accountant guy. The conversation's sudden pivot to my personal life wasn't accidental. This was a familiar family pattern. When financial requests were coming, they softened me up by highlighting my supposed personal failings. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my candor, I've been seeing someone. 5 pairs of eyes locked onto me with sudden interest. You have? Ryan looked genuinely surprised. Who? When? How come you never mentioned him? His name is Blake. We've been dating for about 3 months, and I haven't mentioned him because... I hesitated, realizing the truth might sound harsh. Because I wanted to be sure it was serious before introducing him to family. What I didn't say was that I'd been deliberately keeping Blake separate from my family chaos. He was kind, stable, and respected my boundaries, everything my family wasn't. 3 months, and we're just hearing about him now. Aunt Deborah looked offended. In my day, you introduced a gentleman caller to your family right away. The caviar appetizers arrived, temporarily diverting attention. I watched as my family eagerly loaded the expensive delicacy onto toast points, Ryan taking more than his fair share. The waiter discreetly refilled our champagne glasses, and I noticed we were already on the 2nd bottle. As dinner progressed, Ryan's voice grew louder with each glass of champagne. He transitioned from the NFT idea to stories about his college adventures, mostly tales I knew were exaggerated for effect. Uncle Frank matched him drink for drink, while Aunt Deborah kept making increasingly personal comments about my appearance. You look tired, dear, she said, squinting at me across the table. Those late nights at the office don't do your complexion any favors. Your mother always said a woman should prioritize beauty rest. I smiled tightly. I prioritize what pays the bills, Aunt Deborah. Jessica snickered, and I caught her exchanging a look with Ryan. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket and discreetly checked it under the table. It was a text from Blake. I'm outside the restaurant. Let me know when you want me to come in. My heart skipped. In the chaos of arriving late and dealing with my family, I'd completely forgotten that I had invited Blake to join us for dessert. We had planned this days ago, a way to finally introduce him to my family in a controlled environment. Actually, I said, putting my phone away, I invited Blake to join us for dessert. He should be here any minute. The table fell silent. Ryan's expression shifted from surprise to something harder to read. You invited him here? Tonight, he asked. Yes, I replied firmly. I thought it would be nice for all of you to meet him. Ryan exchanged glances with Aunt Deborah before leaning back in his chair. Well, that's going to be awkward. Why would it be awkward? I asked. Ryan gestured toward the small table in the corner I had noticed earlier. Because this table's for family only, he smirked, pointing to the corner. Your boyfriend can sit over there. The table erupted in laughter. Uncle Frank's booming guffaw, Jessica's snicker, Timothy's snort, and Aunt Deborah's tittering laugh. But it was Ryan's laugh that cut deepest, the same laugh I'd heard countless times when he'd successfully manipulated a situation. Michael the waiter happened to be passing by just as this occurred, and I saw his professional mask slip for just a moment, revealing a flash of sympathy. Several diners at nearby tables glanced our way, some with curiosity, others with disapproval at the disruption. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The humiliation burning in my cheeks wasn't just about this moment. It was about years of similar treatment. I looked at my family laughing at my expense and saw with perfect clarity what I had been unwilling to acknowledge for years. They didn't respect me. They needed me, used me, but didn't value me. I picked up my phone and texted Blake. Change of plans. Wait for me outside. I'll explain later. As the laughter subsided, Ryan poured himself another glass of champagne. The bottle was nearly empty now, and I noticed with growing unease that he was showing clear signs of intoxication, his words slightly slurred, his gestures more expansive, his volume control diminishing. You should have told us you were bringing an outsider, he said, leaning in conspiratorially. Family dinners are sacred, right, guys? The others nodded in agreement, as if this were some long-established rule rather than something Ryan had just invented to embarrass me. Blake isn't an outsider, I replied evenly. He's important to me, which is why I wanted you all to meet him. Important to you? After only 3 months. And Deborah tooted. Your generation rushes into everything. Your mother and father dated for 2 years before they even considered themselves official. Times change, Aunt Deborah, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Speaking of change, Uncle Frank interjected, looking at me with sudden interest. Ryan mentioned you got a big promotion. Congratulations. What does that mean for your salary?
Substantial bump, imagine.
The abrupt shift to my finances wasn't subtle, but I decided to use it to change the subject from Blake. Yes, I'm now the director of brand strategy. It comes with more responsibility, but also a nice bonus and equity package. Like sharks sensing blood in the water, my family's attention focused fully on me for the first time that evening. Equity. Timothy perked up. Like stock options? Something like that, I replied vaguely. That's fantastic, sis. Ryan's voice was too loud, causing diners at the next table to glance over. Always knew you'd make it big. Remember when we were kids, and you said you'd be rich someday? Looks like you were right. I don't recall saying that. I responded, though it hardly mattered. Ryan had a habit of rewriting history to suit his current narrative. Well, we're all very proud of you, Aunt Deborah said, her tone warmer now. You've always been the ambitious one. The waiter arrived with our main courses, momentarily halting the conversation. As he placed my salmon in front of me, I noticed it was the smallest plate by far compared to the generous portions my family had ordered. Can I get anyone another drink? The waiter asked. Before I could decline, Ryan answered for the table. Absolutely. Let's get a bottle of that Camus Special Selection. The 2018 if you have it. He turned to me with a wink. It's a celebration, right, sis? I recognized the wine he'd ordered. It was over $300 a bottle. Combined with the champagne, appetizers, and entrees, this dinner was already approaching $1,000. As the waiter left to fetch the wine, I felt my phone vibrate again. Blake had texted, "No problem. Everything okay?" I discreetly typed back, "Family drama. We'll explain later." So, Jessica leaned forward, twirling a forkful of lobster pasta. Tell us more about this Blake guy. What does he do for a living? He's an architectural engineer, I replied, a hint of pride in my voice. He specializes in sustainable building design. An engineer, Uncle Frank nodded approvingly. Solid profession. Good money in that. Of course, that would be his first question. He does well, I said simply. Not as well as our Amber, I bet, Ryan laughed, nudging Uncle Frank. She's the breadwinner now. There's nothing wrong with a woman being successful, I countered, growing increasingly irritated. Of course not. Ryan's tone was patronizing. But guys can be sensitive about that stuff. You know, bruised egos and all that. Blake isn't sensitive about my success, I said. He celebrates it. That's what supportive partners do. Ryan snorted. Sure, to your face. But trust me, no man wants to feel like he's being out-earned by his girlfriend. Not everyone measures their worth by their bank account, Ryan. I replied sharply. The waiter returned with the expensive wine, going through the tasting ritual with Ryan as if he were the host. After approving it with an exaggerated swirl and sniff that made it clear he knew little about wine, Ryan raised his freshly poured glass. To Amber's success, he declared, and to family, who'll always be there for you when boyfriends come and go. Everyone clinked glasses. I participated reluctantly, taking only a small sip of the overpriced wine. Oh, by the way, Ryan said casually as he cut into his Wagyu steak, I hope you don't mind, but I invited a few friends to join us for dessert and drinks. They should be here soon. I nearly choked on my wine. You what? Just a couple buddies from my cryptocurrency group, Ryan explained, as if this were perfectly normal. They're really interested in this NFT project I was telling you about. Thought it would be good for you to meet them, with your marketing expertise and all. I put down my fork, appetite completely gone. So you can invite your friends to join our sacred family dinner, but my boyfriend gets relegated to a corner table? Jessica and Timothy exchanged glances, clearly enjoying the building tension. Aunt Deborah looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Uncle Frank seemed oblivious, focused entirely on his steak. That's different, Ryan waved dismissively. These guys are potential business partners. It's networking. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. Through the restaurant's large windows, I could see the city lights blurring slightly as tears of frustration threatened to form. I blinked them back, refusing to give my family the satisfaction. At the next table, a couple celebrating what appeared to be an anniversary were feeding each other bites of chocolate dessert, looking at each other with genuine affection. The contrast with my own family dynamic couldn't have been starker. Besides, Ryan continued, oblivious to my silence, I already told them you'd be picking up the check. I said it was your treat for the family gathering. The table went quiet. Even Uncle Frank looked up from his steak. You told them what? My voice was dangerously soft. Well, with your promotion and all. Ryan had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, but pushed forward.
Come on, sis.
You know I'm good for it once this new venture takes off. I happened to glance toward the entrance just then and saw the waiter greeting two men in designer streetwear, undoubtedly Ryan's cryptocurrency friends. Oh, there they are. Ryan stood up, waving them over enthusiastically. As I watched the scene unfold, I overheard Jessica whispering to Timothy, Amber always pays anyway. She might act annoyed, but she'll cover it like she always does. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally broke. My cheeks burned not with embarrassment now, but with anger. My hands, resting on my lap, curled into fists so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. This wasn't just about tonight's dinner or the money. It was about years of being taken for granted, exploited, and manipulated by the people who were supposed to love me most. It was about the realization that in their eyes, my only value was what I could provide. The waiter, Michael, approached our table with a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He'd been watching the dynamics unfold all evening, and I suspected he'd seen similar family dramas play out in this restaurant before. Would anyone care to see the dessert menu? He asked. Ryan immediately answered for the group. Absolutely. And can you add 2 more settings? My friends will be joining us. He gestured to the approaching men. I made my decision in that moment. Quietly, but with resolve hardening like concrete in my chest, I began forming a plan. As Ryan's friends approached our table, I excused myself. I need to use the restroom. I'll be right back. No one acknowledged my departure. They were too busy greeting the newcomers and shuffling chairs to make room. I walked calmly toward the restrooms, but took a detour, finding a quiet corner near the bar where I could collect my thoughts. My mind flashed back to a memory from childhood. I was 10 years old, and Ryan was 14. He had broken our mother's favorite vase while roughhousing indoors after being told repeatedly not to. When our parents came home, he blamed me. They believed him, they always did. I was grounded for 2 weeks while Ryan went to a friend's birthday party the very next day. Why did you take the blame? My best friend had asked when I explained why I couldn't come over. I didn't, I'd replied. No one believed me. Another memory surfaced: my college graduation. I'd worked full-time while maintaining a 3.9 GPA, graduating summa cum laude. Ryan had shown up late to the ceremony, hungover from partying the night before. At the family dinner afterward, he'd announced his plans to open a restaurant, effectively hijacking what should have been my celebration. Our parents had spent the entire meal discussing his business plan and promising to help with startup costs. Then came the most painful memory of all: my mother's hospital room. The cancer had ravaged her body, leaving her frail and barely recognizable. Ryan had visited sporadically, always with excuses about work or travel. I had been there every day, managing her care, coordinating with doctors, handling insurance paperwork, all while maintaining my own job. "Take care of your brother," she had whispered to me the night before she died, her hand cold and papery in mine. "He needs you more than you know." I had nodded, tears streaming down my face, and promised I would. That promise had shaped the last 5 years of my life, justifying every check I wrote, every inconvenience I tolerated, every boundary I allowed to be crossed. Standing in that quiet corner of the Sterling Steakhouse, I realized that my mother's dying request had become a prison of my own making. She hadn't intended for me to sacrifice my own well-being indefinitely. She had raised us both to be independent, responsible adults. Somewhere along the way, I had confused taking care of Ryan with enabling him. My phone buzzed again with a text from Blake. "Still waiting. Should I head home?" I looked back at our table, now even more crowded with Ryan's friends. They were laughing loudly, opening the wine menu, clearly getting comfortable for a long evening at my expense. Not just financially, but emotionally. I texted Blake, "Please wait just a little longer. I'll be out soon." Then I pulled up my banking app and checked my account balance. I had more than enough to cover this extravagant dinner, as Ryan well knew. But for the first time, I asked myself a question I should have considered years ago. Just because I could pay, did that mean I should? Dr. Martinez's words from our last session echoed in my mind. Boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about deciding what you will and won't accept in your life. I took a deep breath and headed not back to the table, but to find the restaurant manager. I found him near the host stand, a dignified man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a name tag reading Thomas. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need to arrange something regarding my party's bill." Thomas nodded professionally. "Of course, ma'am. How can I help?" "I'd like to request separate checks," I explained. "I'll only be paying for what I personally ordered." If Thomas was surprised, he didn't show it. "Certainly. I'll alert your server." Was that table 8, with Mr. Ryan Thompson? I nodded, somewhat surprised that the manager knew my brother by name. Reading my expression, Thomas added discreetly, "Your brother called several times to arrange this reservation. He was quite specific about the table placement and mentioned it would be charged to your account."
Of course he did.
The realization that Ryan had planned this entire scenario, from the expensive restaurant to the strategic invitation of friends, crystallized my resolve even further. "That won't be happening," I said firmly. "I'll pay only for my meal and my drink."
Understood, Mom.
Thomas hesitated, then added with professional neutrality, "We can be discreet about the separate checks until the end of the meal if you prefer." I nodded gratefully. "That would be best. Thank you." Returning to the table, I found Ryan's friends fully integrated into the group. They had already ordered another bottle of the expensive wine and were looking at the dessert menu. One of them, a man with an expensive watch and carefully cultivated stubble, was in the middle of explaining their NFT project to the table. "The beauty of it is that we're getting in on the ground floor," he was saying. "Once Amber brings her marketing expertise to the table, we'll be able to attract serious investors." I slid back into my seat, unnoticed by everyone except Aunt Deborah, who gave me a distracted nod before returning her attention to the man with the watch. My phone buzzed with another text from Blake. "Everything okay?" I texted back. "Not really, but it will be. Can you wait about 30 more minutes?" His response was immediate. "Of course. Take all the time you need." That simple message, The understanding and support it conveyed contrasted sharply with the scene before me. Blake respected my boundaries. He supported me without expecting anything in return. He was more family to me in 3 months than these people had been in years. I watched as Ryan ordered a round of the most expensive desserts on the menu: the chocolate souffle with gold leaf, the tableside flambéed bananas Foster, the artisanal cheese plate. His friends added espresso martinis to the order. "Amber's got this," I heard him say to one of his friends who had half-heartedly reached for his wallet. "She just got a huge promotion. This dinner is basically pocket change to her now." I sat silently, observing the tableau before me with newfound clarity. For years, I had enabled this behavior out of a misguided sense of family obligation. I had allowed myself to be used because I thought that's what love meant: sacrifice without limits. But watching Ryan now, I realized that true family doesn't exploit love, it nurtures it. As the desserts arrived in an impressive parade of sweetness and extravagance, I made my final decision. I opened my notes app and began documenting every comment I heard about expectations of my payment, every joke at my expense. When the bill came, and I wanted to be prepared. "What are you doing over there, so serious?" Jessica asked, noticing my focus on my phone. "Just handling a quick work email," I lied smoothly. "Always working," Ryan sighed dramatically to his friends. "That's our Amber. Never knows when to relax and enjoy life." The irony of him saying this while enjoying an extravagant meal at what he assumed would be my expense was not lost on me. I smiled tightly and put my phone away, waiting for the moment that would change everything. As the dessert plates were cleared, I noticed Michael the waiter conferring quietly with Thomas the manager. They both glanced in our direction, and I knew the moment of truth was approaching. Ryan's friends were now thoroughly drunk, loudly discussing cryptocurrency prices and making grand predictions about their future wealth. Ryan himself was leaning back in his chair, arms slung casually over the back, the picture of entitled confidence. I excused myself once more, ostensibly to take a phone call, and stepped outside briefly. Blake was waiting in his car across the street, and seeing him gave me a surge of strength. I waved to let him know I'd seen him, and he waved back, offering an encouraging smile. That simple gesture of support meant more to me than any of the hollow family bonds I'd been clinging to for years. Back inside, I took a moment to collect myself before returning to the table. I opened my banking app one more time, not to check my balance but to remind myself that I had options. I had worked hard for my financial security. I had earned every penny through dedication, perseverance, and ethical choices. I didn't owe anyone access to the fruits of my labor, not even family. When I returned to the table, the atmosphere had grown even more raucous. Ryan had ordered after-dinner drinks for everyone, expensive cognac and ports. Uncle Frank was red-faced and laughing too loudly at one of Ryan's friends' jokes. Aunt Deborah was showing Jessica pictures on her phone, while Timothy was deep in conversation with Ryan's other friend about sports cars neither of them could afford. No one noticed as I slipped back into my seat except Michael the waiter, who caught my eye with a subtle nod. I nodded back, a silent confirmation of our earlier arrangement. I pulled out my phone and texted Blake. "Almost done here. Things are about to get interesting." His response came quickly. "I'm here for you, whatever happens." For the next 20 minutes, I participated minimally in the conversation, watching as my family and Ryan's friends continued to indulge as if the evening would never end. I mentally tallied each new order, each expensive addition to what was already an outrageous bill. By my calculation, the total had now exceeded $1,500. I thought about all the previous financial emergencies Ryan had created that I had quietly solved. There was the $3,000 for back rent when he faced eviction last year. The $6,000 for legal fees when he got into trouble with a business partner. The countless smaller loans that were never repaid. All told, I had given him over $20,000 in the past 2 years alone. Money I would never see again. My phone vibrated with a calendar notification. Blake, 3 months anniversary. Today marked exactly 3 months since our first date, a simple coffee meeting that had turned into a 5-hour conversation. Blake had remembered even amidst all this chaos. That small reminder of what healthy relationships looked like strengthened my resolve. I watched as Ryan signaled to Michael for yet another round of drinks. "Keep them coming," he called out with a laugh. "We're celebrating my sister's success." Michael glanced at me before responding to Ryan. "I'll check if we have enough of that particular cognac left, sir." Ryan's friends had now fully integrated themselves into the celebration, one of them with his arm around Jessica, who seemed to be enjoying the attention. The other was showing Uncle Frank something on his phone, likely the NFT project they were so excited about. Aunt Deborah was checking her makeup in a compact mirror, occasionally shooting disapproving glances at Jessica's flirtation. I heard Ryan's voice rise above the general noise. "And once Amber invests in our startup, we'll be able to scale quickly. She's got the capital and the marketing expertise we need." So that was the play. Not just dinner, but a significant investment in yet another doomed venture. In the past, I might have considered it out of obligation or hoped that this time would be different. Now, I saw it for what it was, a calculated move to exploit my success once again. I felt strangely calm as I documented this comment in my phone, adding it to the growing list. It wasn't anger driving me anymore, but clarity. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my self-respect and establishing long-overdue boundaries. Michael approached our table with professional composure. "Would anyone care for coffee or tea before I bring the check?" Ryan waved dismissively.
Just the check.
"And make sure it all goes on one bill." "Very good, sir," Michael replied, his expression neutral. Only I caught the quick glance he sent my way. As Michael walked away, I steeled myself for what was coming. This would be uncomfortable, possibly even ugly. But as Dr. Martinez had reminded me many times, discomfort is the price of growth. I texted Blake, "Heading out in about 10 minutes. Things might get tense." His response warmed me. "I'm right outside whenever you're ready. You've got this." I looked around the table at these people who called themselves my family. There was Ryan, who had taken advantage of my generosity for years while undermining me at every turn. There was Aunt Deborah, who compared me unfavorably to my mother while conveniently accepting my financial support for family gatherings. There was Uncle Frank, interested in me only when he could benefit from my success. And my cousins, who followed Ryan's lead in treating me as the family ATM rather than a person deserving of respect. I realized with startling clarity that I had been chasing an illusion. The dream of a supportive, loving family that simply didn't exist in this form. The people who truly cared about me were elsewhere. Blake waiting patiently outside, my friends who respected my boundaries, colleagues who valued my contributions, even Dr. Martinez who had been gently guiding me toward this moment of truth. I took a deep breath and prepared myself as I saw Michael approaching with a leather folder containing the bill. Michael approached our table with practiced grace, the leather folder containing the bill held discreetly in his hand. "Here's your check, sir," he said, placing it directly in front of me rather than Ryan. Ryan reached across the table, plucking the folder from my hands before I could open it. "Let me see the damage," he joked, flipping it open. His eyes widened momentarily before his face resumed its usual confident expression. "Looks like we had quite the celebration," he announced, sliding the folder back toward me. "Just over $1,700. Worth every penny for family time, right, sis?" All eyes turned to me expectantly. This was the moment they had been building toward all evening. The moment when I would sigh, perhaps complain a little for show, but ultimately pull out my credit card and handle everything as I always did. Instead, I smiled and said calmly, "Michael, could you please bring the separate checks we discussed?" The table fell silent. Ryan's smirk froze on his face. "What are you talking about?" "I arranged for separate checks," I explained, my voice steady. "I'll be paying only for what I ordered." Ryan let out a forced laugh, looking around the table as if waiting for others to join in. No one did. "Very funny, Amber. Now seriously, just put it on your card and I'll get you back later." "No, Ryan. I won't be paying for this dinner. At least, not all of it." Michael returned with several smaller folders. "Here are the individual checks as requested, ma'am." He distributed them around the table, one to me, one to Ryan, one to Aunt Deborah and Uncle Frank, one to each of my cousins and one to each of Ryan's friends. The stunned silence deepened as everyone stared at their respective bills. "This is ridiculous," Ryan sputtered, his face flushing. "We came here as a family. Amber, you know I can't afford this right now." "Actually, what's ridiculous is expecting me to foot a $1,700 bill without even discussing it first," I replied, my voice remaining calm despite my racing heart. "What's ridiculous is inviting friends to an expensive dinner on someone else's dime without permission." Aunt Deborah looked horrified. "Amber, this isn't how family behaves. Your mother would be so disappointed." That comment, the invocation of my mother to manipulate me, would have crushed me before. Now it only strengthened my resolve.
No, Aunt Deborah.
What would disappoint my mother is seeing her children's relationship reduced to financial exploitation. I turned to Ryan. "Mom asked me to take care of you, not enable you. There's a difference." Uncle Frank was examining his portion of the bill with growing alarm. $400 for dinner? This is highway robbery. "It didn't seem like robbery when you thought Amber was paying," Michael observed quietly as he collected my credit card for my modest bill of $87, the salmon, one glass of champagne, and my share of the tip. Ryan's friends were suddenly very interested in their phones, avoiding eye contact with everyone at the table. "You can't be serious." Ryan's voice had lost its usual charm, revealing the anger beneath. "After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Like what exactly?" "Living rent-free in my apartment for 8 months? Borrowing money you never repay? Undermining me to our family?" "That's not fair," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "What's not fair is how you've treated me," I said, standing up from my chair. "What's not fair is expecting me to financially support you indefinitely while you make no effort to support yourself. What's not fair is this entire evening. An elaborate setup to manipulate me into investing in yet another of your schemes." Ryan's expression confirmed my suspicion. This dinner had never been about celebrating my promotion or spending time as a family. It had been a calculated move to soften me up for a financial ask. "I've been recording this entire conversation," I told him, holding on my phone. "I have multiple witnesses to the fact that you planned this dinner with the expectation that I would pay, without consulting me. I have evidence of you telling your friends I would be investing in your business, again without my knowledge or consent." "You recorded us?" Jessica looked outraged. "That's invasion of privacy." "Actually, Virginia is a one-party consent state," I replied. "I'm legally permitted to record conversations I'm part of. But that's beside the point. I don't intend to use these recordings unless Ryan continues to harass me for money." Michael returned with my credit card and receipt. "Is there anything else I can help you with, ma'am?" "No, thank you, Michael. You've been very professional throughout this uncomfortable situation." I signed my receipt, leaving a generous tip that was nearly as much as my meal. Then I gathered my purse and jacket. "Where do you think you're going?" Ryan demanded, his charm completely evaporated now. "You can't just leave us with this bill." "Yes, I can," I replied simply. "And I am. I'm also giving you 30 days' notice to find a new place to live. I'll be changing the locks tomorrow." "You can't kick me out. I'm family." Ryan's voice had risen enough that nearby diners were staring. "Being family doesn't give you the right to take advantage of me," I said. "I love you, Ryan. I always will. But this dynamic between us is over." I turned to the rest of the table. "I'm sorry it came to this. I would have preferred to handle things differently, but you've left me no choice. If any of you want to have a relationship with me going forward, it will be based on mutual respect, not financial exploitation." Aunt Deborah was dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, while Uncle Frank stared at his bill in disbelief. Jessica and Timothy were whispering urgently to each other. Ryan's friends were already arguing over how to split their portion. "Goodbye," I said, then walked away from the table with my head held high. As I crossed the restaurant toward the exit, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me, raised voices, accusations, the scrape of chairs. I didn't look back. Thomas the manager gave me a subtle nod of respect as I passed the host stand. Outside, the cool evening air felt like freedom against my skin. Blake was leaning against his car across the street, and when he saw me, his face lit up with a smile that warmed me from the inside out. "How did it go?" he asked as I approached. "I stood up for myself," I replied, feeling lighter than I had in years. Finally, he opened the passenger door for me. "I'm proud of you. Where to now?" I took one last look at the Sterling Steakhouse, where my family was undoubtedly still reeling from the disruption of their expectations. I felt a momentary pang of guilt, quickly replaced by the certainty that I had done the right thing. "Anywhere," I said, sliding into the car. "As long as it's forward." Blake drove us to a quiet coffee shop a few miles from the restaurant. As we settled into a corner booth with steaming mugs, I recounted the evening's events in detail. "I still can't believe I actually did that," I concluded, wrapping my hands around my mug for comfort. "Part of me feels terrible, but another part feels free," Blake suggested. "Exactly." I nodded. Like I've been carrying this weight for so long that I stopped noticing it until it was gone. Blake reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing, Amber. From everything you've told me about your family, this was long overdue." "I know, but I keep thinking about my mother's last request. Take care of your brother." What if I've failed her? "Taking care of someone doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior," Blake said gently. "Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is establish boundaries." As we talked, my phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming texts and calls from Ryan and the rest of my family. I silenced it, without looking at the messages. Whatever they had to say could wait until tomorrow. "Do you want to stay at my place tonight?" Blake offered. "Just so you don't have to face Ryan right away?" I considered it briefly before shaking my head. "No, I need to go home. It's my apartment after all. Ryan's the one who should feel uncomfortable, not me." When I finally returned to my apartment around midnight, I found Ryan waiting in the living room, pacing angrily. The moment I walked in, he launched into a tirade. "How could you humiliate me like that?" he demanded. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My friends think I'm a joke now. And Aunt Deborah had to put the bill on her emergency credit card." I set down my purse calmly. How did you get home?" The question seemed to throw him off balance. "What? How did you get home?" "Since you couldn't pay your bill, I assumed the restaurant wouldn't call you a cab." Timothy paid for an Uber," he admitted reluctantly. "So, you found a solution," I observed. "Just like you'll find a solution to your housing situation within the next 30 days. "You can't be serious about kicking me out." Ryan's tone shifted from anger to disbelief. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's for you to figure out," I replied. "You're 38 years old, Ryan. It's time you took responsibility for your own life. This is about that boyfriend of yours, isn't it? He's turned you against your family." I shook my head.
"No, Ryan.
This is about me finally recognizing an unhealthy dynamic and choosing to change it. Blake has nothing to do with it, except that being in a healthy relationship has shown me how dysfunctional our relationship is." "So that's it? You're just throwing away family for some guy you've known for 3 months?" "I'm not throwing away family," I corrected him. "I'm redefining what family means to me. And it doesn't mean being financially exploited or emotionally manipulated." Ryan stormed off to the guest room, slamming the door behind him. I slept surprisingly well that night, despite knowing the difficult conversations were far from over. The next morning, I called a locksmith and had my locks changed while Ryan was out. I left his belongings in the guest room but gave him a key with a clearly stated time limit, 30 days to find new accommodations. Over the following week, my phone was flooded with messages from family members. Aunt Deborah called daily, alternating between guilt trips and tearful pleas to reconsider my harsh treatment of Ryan. Uncle Frank left a single voicemail asking if my little tantrum was over yet. Jessica and Timothy sent passive-aggressive texts suggesting I needed therapy for my abandonment issues. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I scheduled an appointment with my financial advisor to protect my assets and create a formal plan for my future. We discussed retirement savings, investment strategies, and ways to ensure that my financial security couldn't be compromised by family emergencies. Have you considered creating a formal loan agreement if you do choose to help family members in the future? My advisor asked. I have, I replied. But I think for now, I need to take a complete break from financial entanglements with my family. 2 weeks after the dinner, Aunt Deborah showed up at my office unannounced. My assistant, recognizing her from photos on my desk, reluctantly showed her in. Amber, this has gone on long enough, she declared as soon as the door closed behind her. Ryan is devastated. He's been sleeping on Timothy's couch, and it's not working out. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, keeping my voice neutral. But that's between Ryan and Timothy. How can you be so cold? He's your brother.
Yes, he is.
And I love him. But loving someone doesn't mean enabling behavior that hurts both of us in the long run. Aunt Deborah's expression hardened. Your mother would be ashamed of you. The words were designed to wound, but this time they didn't land.
No, Aunt Deborah.
My mother raised me to be strong and independent. She would be proud that I'm finally standing up for myself. After she left, I felt a momentary wave of doubt. Was I being too harsh? Was I destroying my family over one expensive dinner? But then I reminded myself that the dinner was merely a symptom of a much deeper problem. Years of being taken for granted and exploited by the people who should have supported me most. The following weekend, I invited a small group of people over for dinner. Not my usual family, but people who had shown me genuine care and respect. There was Blake, of course, and my friend Megan from college, who had always been honest with me even when it was difficult. I invited my colleague David and his wife Sarah, who had mentored me through my early career. And somewhat surprisingly, I invited my cousin Ellie, Aunt Deborah's youngest daughter, who had distanced herself from family drama years ago. As we sat around my dining table, each having contributed something to the meal, I was struck by how different this felt from family gatherings I was accustomed to. There was no underlying tension, no hidden agendas, no keeping score of who owed what. Just genuine conversation and connection. I've been meaning to thank you, Ellie said quietly as we washed dishes together after dinner. What you did at that restaurant, it was brave. You heard about that? I asked, surprised. She nodded. Mom called me ranting about it. But between us, I've been waiting years for someone to stand up to Ryan's manipulation. That's partly why I moved 3 states away. Her support meant more than I could express. Maybe I hadn't lost all my family after all. Just redefined who is truly family to me. 3 months after the fateful dinner, I received a text from Ryan that was different from his previous angry or manipulative messages. Can we meet for coffee?
Just to talk.
My treat. For real this time. I agreed with cautious optimism. We met at a simple cafe, nothing like the Sterling Steakhouse. Ryan looked different, humbler somehow, with fewer of the designer clothes and accessories he usually prioritized over rent. I got a job, he said after we'd exchanged awkward greetings. Nothing fancy. Administrative assistant at a dental office. But it's a start. That's great, Ryan, I said, genuinely pleased. How's it going? It's an adjustment. Being told what to do, sticking to a schedule. But my boss is patient. He stirred his coffee unnecessarily. I'm sharing an apartment with a guy from my recovery group. Recovery group?
This was news to me.
Ryan nodded, not meeting my eyes. Gamblers Anonymous. Turns out I had some issues to work through. Still do. The admission stunned me. Ryan had always refused to acknowledge any problem beyond temporary bad luck. I'm proud of you, I said and meant it. That takes courage. Not as much courage as what you did, he replied. You were right, about all of it. I was using you. I've been using everyone for so long, I didn't even see it anymore. We talked for over an hour, more honestly than we had in years. There were no quick fixes, no magical reconciliations. The trust that had been broken would take time to rebuild, if it ever could be fully. But it was a start. 6 months after the Sterling Steakhouse incident, I hosted another dinner party. This time, the guest list included a carefully selected group: Blake, now officially my boyfriend, a few close friends, Ellie and her husband, and tentatively Ryan. Everyone contributed something: a dish, a bottle of wine, their presence. Ryan brought a homemade dessert and a handwritten card thanking me for the invitation. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old patterns threatening to resurface. But it was real, and it was based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. As I looked around at the people gathered in my home, I realized that family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by love, respect, and mutual support. Some family we're born into, some we choose, and some we rebuild from the ashes of dysfunctional patterns. Standing up at that restaurant table had been terrifying. Walking away from toxic relationships had been painful. But the life I was building now, one where I was valued for who I was, not what I could provide, that was worth every uncomfortable moment. So, what would I say to someone facing a similar situation? Trust your instincts. Set your boundaries. Know your worth. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. And sometimes, standing up and walking away is the only path to finding your way home to yourself. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family or friends? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about navigating life's challenging relationships. Remember, your worth isn't determined by how much you give to those who take advantage. It's in how you honor yourself while still being capable of love. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives you courage if you're facing your own restaurant moment with someone in your life.